Section 1 of Volsungs saga. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Volsungs saga by Anonymous. Translated by Eirikr Magnusson and William Morris. Section 1, Chapter 1.
Her hefur op och ser frathamania sigi nevender och kalaver.
Here begins the tale, and tells of a man who was named Siggi, and called of men the son of Odin. Another man withal is told of in the tale hight Skadi, a great man and mighty of his hands. Yet was Siggi the mightier and the higher of kin, according to the speech of men of that time. Now Skadi had a thrall with whom the story must deal somewhat, Brethi by name, who was called after that work which he had to do. In prowess and might of hand he was equal to men who were held more worthy, yea, and better than some thereof. Now it is to be told that on a time Siggi fared to the hunting of the deer, and the thrall with him. And they hunted deer daylong till the evening. And when they gathered together their prey in the evening, lo, greater and more by far was that which Brethi had slain than Siggi's prey. And this thing he much misliked. And he said that great wonder it was that a very thrall should outdo him in the hunting of deer. So he fell on him, and slew him, and buried the body of him thereafter in a snowdrift. Then he went home at eventide, and says that Brethi had ridden away from him into the wildwood. Soon was he out of my sight, he says, and naught more I wot of him. Skadi misdoubted the tale of Siggi, and deemed that this was a guile of his, and that he would have slain Brethi. So he sent men to seek for him, and to such an end came their seeking that they found him in a certain snowdrift. Then said Skadi that men should call that snowdrift Brethi's drift from henceforth, and thereafter have folk followed, so that in such wise they call every drift that is right great. Thus it is well seen that Siggi has slain the thrall and murdered him. So he is given forth to be a wolf in holy places, and may no more abide in the land with his father. Therewith Odin bare him fellowship from the land, so long away that right long it was, and made no stay till he brought him to certain warships. So Siggi falls to lying out a warring, with the strength that his father gave him or ever they parted. And happy was he in his warring, and ever prevailed, till he brought it about that he won by his wars land and lordship at the last. And thereupon he took to him a noble wife, and became a great and mighty king, and ruled over the land of the Huns, and was the greatest of warriors. He had a son by his wife, who was called Eirikr, who grew up in his father's house, and soon became great of growth and shapely. Chapter 2. Now Siggi grew old, and had many to envy him, so that at last those turned against him whom he trusted most, yea, even the brothers of his wife. For these fell on him at his unwariest, when there were few with him to withstand them, and brought so many against him that they prevailed against him, and there fell Siggi and all his folk with him. But Eirikr his son was not in this trouble, and he brought together so mighty a strength of his friends and the great men of the land, that he got to himself both the lands and kingdom of Siggi his father. And so now, when he deems that the feet under him stand firm in his rule, then he calls to mind that which he had against his mother's brothers, who had slain his father. So the king gathers together a mighty army, and therewith falls on his kinsmen, deeming that if he made their kinship of small account, yet none the less they had first wrought evil against him. So he wrought his will herein, in that he departed not from strife before he had slain all his father's banesmen, though dreadful the deed seemed in every wise. So now he gets land, lordship, and fee, and has become a mightier man than his father before him. Much wealth won in war got Eirikr to himself, and wedded a wife withal, such as he deemed meet for him. And long they lived together, but had no child to take the heritage after them. And ill content they both were with that, and prayed the gods with heart and soul that they might get them a child. And so it is said that Odin hears their prayer, and Freya no less hearkens wherewith they prayed unto her. So she, never lacking for all good counsel, calls to her casket-bearing May, the daughter of Hrimnir the giant, and sets an apple in her hand, and bids her bring it to the king. She took the apple, and did on her the gear of a crow, and went flying till she came whereas the king sat on a mound, and there she let the apple fall into the lap of the king. But he took the apple, and deemed he knew whereto it would avail. So he goes home from the mound to his own folk, and came to the queen, and some deal of that apple she ate. So, as the tale tells, the queen soon knew that she was big with child, but a long time wore or ever she might give birth to the child. So it befell that the king must needs go to the wars, after the custom of kings, that he may keep his own land in peace. And in this journey it came to pass that Eirikr fell sick and got his death, being minded to go home to Odin, a thing much desired of many folk in those days. Now, no otherwise it goes with the queen's sickness than heretofore, nor may she be the lighter of her child. And 6 winters wore away with the sickness still heavy on her, so that at the last she feels that she may not live long. Wherefore now she bade cut the child from out of her, and it was done, even as she bade. A man-child was it, and great of growth from his birth, as well might be. And they say that the youngling kissed his mother or ever she died. But to him a name is given, and he is called Volsung, and he was king over Hunland in the room of his father. From his early years he was big and strong, and full of daring in all manly deeds and trials, and he became the greatest of warriors, and of good hap in all the battles of his warfaring. Now when he was fully come to man's estate, Hrimnir the giant sends to him Hlioth his daughter, she of whom the tale told that she brought the apple to Eirikr, Volsung's father. So Volsung weds her withal, and long they abode together with good hap and great love. They had 10 sons and 1 daughter, and their eldest son was hight Sigmund, and their daughter Signy. And these 2 were twins, and in all wise the foremost and the fairest of the children of Volsung the king, and mighty, as all his seed was, even as has been long told from ancient days and in tales of long ago, with the greatest fame of all men, how that the Volsungs have been great men and high-minded, and far above the most of men, both in cunning and in prowess, and in all things high and mighty. So says the story, that King Volsung let build a noble hall, in such a wise that a big oak tree stood therein, and that the limbs of the tree blossomed fair out over the roof of the hall, while below stood the trunk within it, and the said trunk did men call Bronstock. Chapter 3. There was a king called Siggeir, who ruled over Gothland, a mighty king and of many folk. He went to meet Volsung the king, and prayed him for Signy his daughter to wife. And the king took his talk well, and his sons withal, but she was loath thereto. Yet she bade her father rule in this as in all other things that concerned her. So the king took such rede that he gave her to him, and she was betrothed to King Siggeir. And for the fulfilling of the feast and the wedding was King Siggeir to come to the house of King Volsung. The king got ready the feast according to his best might, and when all things were ready, came the king's guests and King Siggeir withal at the day appointed, and many a man of great account had Siggeir with him. The tale tells that great fires were made endlong the hall, and the great tree aforesaid stood midmost thereof. Withal folk say that whenas men sat by the fires in the evening, a certain man came into the hall, unknown of aspect to all men, and such like array he had, that over him was a spotted cloak, and he was barefoot, and had linen breeches knit tight even unto the bone. And he had a sword in his hand as he went up to the Bronstock, and a slouched hat upon his head. Huge he was, and seeming ancient, and one-eyed. So he drew his sword, and smote it into the tree trunk, so that it sank in up to the hilts, and all held back from greeting the man. Then he took up the word, and said,
Sa thesus verthi bregther or stokinum, tha skal sa that thigya admirat gjof, och skal han that själfer sanna, at aldrig bar han betra svert sieri hindi in theta
Whoso draweth this sword from this stock shall have the same as a gift from me, and shall find in good sooth that never bare he better sword in hand than is this. Therewith out went the old man from the hall, and none knew who he was or whither he went. Now men stand up, and none would fain be the last to lay hand to the sword, for they deemed that he would have the best of it who might first touch it. So all the noblest went thereto first, and then the others, one after another. But none who came thereto might avail to pull it out, for in no wise would it come away, howsoever they tugged at it. But now up comes Sigmund, King Volsung's son, and sets hand to the sword, and pulls it from the stock, even as if it lay loose before him. So good that weapon seemed to all, that none thought he had seen such a sword before. And Siggeir would fain buy it of him at thrice its weight of gold. But Sigmund said, "Thou mightest have taken the sword no less than I from there whereas it stood, if it had been thy lot to bear it. But now, since it has first of all fallen into my hand, never shalt thou have it, though thou biddest therefore all the gold thou hast." King Siggeir grew wroth at these words, and deemed Sigmund had answered him scornfully. But whereas he was a wary man and a double-dealing, he made as if he heeded this matter in no wise. Yet that same evening he thought how he might reward it, as was well seen afterwards.